Welcome back to 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network. Josh Joy and Chris Brown, they are here with me. We had January non-conference basketball over the weekend and some solid January non-conference basketball over the weekend with the Big 12 SEC Challenge. The SEC won the event 5-4, but it's not like either and 5-4 suggests that nobody made a huge statement. Missouri almost lost to TCU. Alabama, your best team in that conference right now, loses to a shorthanded Oklahoma, but then Tennessee just trounces Kansas, but then again, is Kansas really that good? So another fairly even-sided Big 12 SEC challenge. Was 5-5 last year, a similar result this year. But challenges like this are very refreshing. Get some different games in there, some games that feel a little bit more like NCAA tournament games, in my opinion, because they're games that you don't usually see, because they're non-conference, because it's late in the year, because you get high-quality basketball teams playing each other. All of those things result in some good games. But Josh, we'll start with you. Biggest takeaways from the Big 12 SEC Challenge, wherever you want to start. If you have a specific game, take it away.
That was my ultimate takeaway, was that this, we talked about on Friday, this is about the SEC. The Big 12 doesn't need to prove anything.
Mm-hmm.
Baylor is the second best team in the country. Everybody from Kansas to Texas Tech to West Virginia to Oklahoma State has looked good this season. There are 7 NCAA tournament caliber teams in that conference. This isn't about the Big 12.
Right.
This was about what could the SEC do. And I feel like the SEC has to be pleased with the end result, but also slightly disappointed, because if they just would have gotten one more win, I think there's a different narrative coming out of this. Yeah, Alabama loses and they just got out-toughed by Oklahoma. It's not a great look. Missouri needed to pull things together at the end and survive in overtime against TCU. That's not a great look for what's supposed to be your second best team.
Mm-hmm.
But then you get the Tennessee win, which is really good. You got I'm blanking on the other one. But you kind of split the... Thank you. Florida, yeah. Right. Florida has a very impressive performance in Morgantown, so you're kind of 2-2 in those games.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other two that you're looking at with real NCAA tournament implications are Arkansas, Oklahoma State, and LSU, Texas Tech. Arkansas can't get it done against Oklahoma State, and the real one that to me sort of flips this.
Well, two games that were really close. Both of those games were really close too. Sorry.
Yeah. And LSU was looking good, and then gave up 12 unanswered points in the final minute.
To the clutchest player in college basketball, baby. Kamar Baldwin last year, Mac Daddy McClung this year. Love it. Electric.
So that to me is ultimately where I landed, is if LSU could have held on, or if Arkansas could have beaten Oklahoma State as a team on the bubble to beat an NCAA tournament team, then the SEC would have felt really good, even though it was not a good look for Alabama, wasn't a good look for Missouri. Getting that Tennessee win was big, and Florida is playing really good basketball right now, as proven by their win in Morgantown. So it was just kind of a toss-up in the end, where good things for the SEC, bad things, but they're kind of in the same spot, which is they're just not on the same level as the Big 12 at the end of the day.
And the other, and we didn't really do anything here. I guess the only thing that happened in terms of making the SEC a stronger resume building conference is that Tennessee solidified themselves as a good win for the rest of the season. Right. I think what they, beating Kansas like they did, unless they just completely fall apart in the rest of their SEC schedule, anybody who beats them, that's going to look good on your resume. And it's not like I wasn't expecting Tennessee to fall apart, but winning that game against Kansas was a reminder that that's a good basketball team. That solidifies them in the top 25 probably for the rest of the season, unless something weird happens. And that's a good thing for the SEC that you didn't lose, right? Missouri holds on, so you don't lose that. Missouri with a loss to TCU at home would have looked really bad. So now you've got 3 teams in the SEC, Alabama, Tennessee and Missouri that were there prior to this weekend, but they didn't do anything to take away their prestige, if you will, as teams that you will actually be helpful to beat. I'm talking specifically about Auburn, who needs as many good teams in the SEC to have a chance to beat as possible, and we sort of maintained that. The thing I'll say about Alabama is, listen, the difference between good teams and great teams, there are a lot of things, but one thing I always look for is that great teams find a way to beat good teams when they don't shoot it well. And Alabama over the last few weeks, the last 10 days, 2 weeks, has shown that they're a good team. They're not a great team. They've struggled against teams that they probably shouldn't have really struggled against when they don't shoot it well. And then you go play an Oklahoma team that, by the way, crazy end of January. Alabama, Kansas, Texas, and West Virginia. They have all 4 of those wins in basically the last 14 days to 17 days, something like that. Alabama didn't shoot it well. It's a shorthanded Oklahoma team. Oklahoma is clearly good. You don't find a way to win that game. That's okay. That just means you're a good team, not a great team. But other than that, there was a ton of sort of, back and forth, and I end up in basically the same place that I did with the SEC prior to the beginning of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm with you. It wasn't a huge needle mover for the conferences, for the SEC in particular, like you said. That's what we're looking at overall. What a January it was for Oklahoma. First team since 1974 with 4 wins against AP top 10 teams in the same month. The last team to do that was the 73-74 NC State team that went on to win the national championship. So just a little fun fact. So that was impressive for Oklahoma. Yeah, I don't have anything grand overarching to add that you guys haven't already covered. I will say I was impressed again by Florida. That was the team that the game that for me caught my attention the most. Only 2 teams have scored more points against West Virginia than Florida did with their 85, and that was Gonzaga and Texas Tech. That's the only 2 teams that have scored more against West Virginia, and quite a journey it's been for Florida. It's been an up and down season, right? They started on pause. Then you have Keontae Johnson out for the year. Now they've won 4 straight, and it's looking up. Colin Castleton has been one of the biggest surprise breakouts of the season, and he was outstanding. The Michigan transfer, 21 points, 7 rebounds. So that was the game that I sort of saw the most of, that I was looking at. One of the couple of games I was looking at going into the weekend, I saw the most of that one, and I was really impressed by what I saw from Florida. And then other than that, I think you guys have hit on the things that really caught my attention. I'll just say with Kansas now, they've lost 4 of 5 for the first time in more than 30 years. Now they're going to get to play Kansas State this week to try to just, right the ship, get a win. But they're now 4-4 against ranked opponents this season. They're just not shooting the ball well. They've still got another trip to Texas, another game against Baylor on the schedule in conference play. So there's opportunities for them to get this right and go up against these great teams. But it's pretty concerning now. They've got some real issues that need to be sorted out. I'm not concerning in the, it's all relative to your expectations for Kansas. And we have such high expectations for Kansas, but they're in a rough spot right now. I mean, they got to get things figured out.
And I mean, that started against Kentucky when they couldn't score the basketball.
Right.
And we all came away talking about how Kentucky can't hit threes, but yeah, this has been a consistent theme for Kansas. They just can't get 2 or 3 guys playing well on the same night. So then you end up shooting 38% from the field, 25% from 3 against a really good defensive team in Tennessee. And they just aren't beating good teams right now. And you play a lot of good teams in the Big 12, and you drew one in the Big 12 SEC Challenge.
Yep.
They're going to be fine, but the ceiling is just not very high. There are clear holes there. A couple other things to the West Virginia Florida game. And it's funny because you come away praising Colin Castleton. There was a stretch at the beginning of that game where I thought, Florida is not ready for what they are meeting in this West Virginia team, because Castleton got pulled at least once, if not twice, because he just wasn't playing hard enough. He got beat to a loose ball by Miles McBride. He got bullied on the post, and Mike White just said, if you're not up for it, you're not playing. You need to go to the bench and get yourself composed. And then credit to Castleton, he came back and was magnificent. I really thought that they were going to fall apart, and that a couple of games into this thing, I was ready to come here talking about how the SEC was just not ready. Alabama was not ready for the toughness that Oklahoma showed and the way that their guards played and the way that they competed defensively. And Florida wasn't ready for West Virginia's toughness, but Florida found a way. And it's a real credit to Mike White. And I have not been the biggest Mike White fan in terms of his ability to get his team in a good place mentally to be able to put a performance like that together. And of course, I'm talking before Keontae Johnson. This season has been extenuating circumstances, but credit to those guys for sort of pulling it together and really playing inspired basketball right now after everything that they've been through. And that's also a credit to Mike White's leadership. The other thing I want to talk briefly about is Sharife Cooper. And Auburn was so bad at the beginning of the season when they self-imposed that NCAA tournament ban that we forgot to mention that on Friday. So they're not eligible for the NCAA tournament. It's a fun hypothetical because of the interesting place they're in, but also wanted to mention and acknowledge that we didn't bring that up because we were thinking about it because they were so bad when it happened that it just slipped your mind. But Sharife Cooper, I mean, Dan Dockich was calling him I don't know if either of you saw this. Dan Dockich called him the best player in the country.
No.
Before that
Come on, Dan. Come on, Dan.
Sharife Cooper went and
not out of character,
15 points on 6 of 17 shooting.
Well, he performed exactly like you would expect a college freshman who's played 8 games to perform against the best defensive backcourt in the country, right? I mean, it's definitely a right. You either come out thinking that Sharife Cooper is the best player in the country or he's not ready. There's no really in between here. He, like you said, Josh, I mean, there's just a level of toughness in the Big 12 that's not there in the SEC. And Florida was able to bounce back from getting hit in the mouth by it, like you said, but Oklahoma was clearly the tougher team in that game. And it's just different playing Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, and Maceo Teague than it is playing anybody in the SEC. Everyone knew that it was something that Sharife Cooper has never seen before in his life. He's never seen a level of defense that he was going to get against Baylor. And he's also already the number 1 guy on the scouting report. I was cautiously hoping that maybe he would just do something ridiculous, and even if Auburn loses the game, he has 28 points and it's a ton of fun to watch. But that's exactly the stat line I expect. And I'll just add, like, Sharif's not a big guy, right? He's 6 feet tall, and so it's not like he has a Cade Cunningham level physique to him that it's like he's playing a team that's tougher than his team, a team that's better than his team, the best defensive team in the country with the best defensive backcourt, and depending on who you ask, the best backcourt period in the country, right? That's exactly the right. He certainly wasn't impressive, shot under 15 points. He wasn't the best player on his team in that game, and that just couldn't be the case for Auburn to look any good whatsoever, for Auburn to look like they were going to compete in that game, or at least truly compete in that game, right? But it's exactly what you should. Nobody should feel any differently about Sharife Cooper after that game, right? That's what I would expect from everybody in that situation, and that's exactly what we got. So that's what that was my biggest takeaway from Cooper. Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're good. And it was a good sign for Auburn that even when Cooper was a non-factor at the beginning of that game, they still hung in there for a while, and you saw some good things from the rest of the team, like you mentioned, because that's right. That's ultimately what they're playing for right now, is that this group of guys have committed to this being a multi-year project because you don't have an NCAA tournament this year, whether Cooper's there or not. So that part of it was a good experience, and I was very curious about the NBA potential of Sharife Cooper 8 games into his college career, and he wasn't ready for what happened. Not his fault. That's just a different breed.
And few guys are.
Right. That it doesn't really, like you said, I think that's a good way to put it. It doesn't change anything, but the idea of sort of anointing this guy as this first team All-American, far and away best freshman in the country, right behind Cade Cunningham and Jalen Suggs or whatever. I'll take Cunningham and Suggs all day long still.
100%. 100%. Anything else on the Big 12 SEC Challenge?
I don't think so.
Sweet. We'll come back to winners and losers to round out the show. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.